anticipating human behavior is one of the hardest things that you can possibly do. And I would refer back to my time in the Marine Corps as my personal evidence of seeing that play out. I mean, people are unpredictable. I've been in Afghanistan, 2009, 2010. I've seen some stuff that I was like, I never thought I would see this. So if anybody tells you that they know the outcome of what's going to happen in the courtroom, I would say, I think that it's good to be confident, but it's not good to be reckless. Saying that you can predict human behavior is a little reckless, in my opinion.
Welcome to Hot Docket, the show where we talk about winning marketing strategies that have built the most successful law firms.
Join us every 2 weeks for the latest trends and tactics to grow your law firm.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode, or bi-weekly episode, of the Hot Docket podcast. Today, we have with us a very special guest, Carson Honeycutt of the Honeycutt Law firm out of Alaska. Carson, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Carson does a lot of workers' comp and also ADR, which we had a little alternative dispute resolution, which we had a little conversation about before we press play. I would love for Carson to kind of just revisit what ADR is and why he's doing it in combination with workers' comp right now, because I think it's a pretty hot take. So Carson, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I started in litigation and workers' comp, doing primarily that. And what I realized over time is that there are more cases than there are attorneys to take those cases. And those cases still need to be resolved. And frequently, if there's not somebody to come in and assist with that process, people are just kind of gutting each other the entire time and not really necessarily knowing what direction that's headed. So alternative dispute resolution is a solution for that. Now, alternative dispute resolution takes many different forms. The two most prevalent are arbitration and mediation. And you can't find many contracts these days that don't have an arbitration clause in it. And arbitration is more formal. Mediation is more informal. And the reason that I personally tend to focus more on mediation is because of the informality of it. It allows the parties to kind of take their destiny back into their own hands and remove it from potentially a disinterested party or adjudicator like a judge or an arbitrator, and put the power back in the hands of the parties to come to a reasonable conclusion before somebody else decides their future, kind of maybe potentially against their will.
One of the reasons I thought your take was very interesting is you basically said you think the way lawyers practice today is largely going to go by the wayside with AI coming into play and people being closer to the law and like allowing AI or AI allowing people to have more of a finger on the pulse of the law. And I think like the thing that's very interesting to me about that statement was we read, I think a while ago, Running with the Bulls. It's like that. Who's it by? Oh yeah, by Nick Rowley. And one of the things that stuck with me from that book was, and I've heard it since then a couple of times, it seems like these like heavy-hitting PI trial attorneys tend to think mediation is a huge waste of time. Like it's something ordered by the judge as part of the process, and nothing ever really seems to come from it. And that is how I think of mediation now, because I think I've been slanted by like that mindset. What would you say to folks like that?
Well, and you guys do marketing, right? It's not a question of what the product provider thinks. It's a question of what the product consumer thinks. And I think that this has been a huge flaw within the legal communities. We've kind of become a self-licking ice cream cone, which is where we develop this mindset that this is the way it's got to be. And we tell people that that's the way it's going to be. And what people are saying by and large is that we don't trust attorneys and we don't trust their opinion. And it's because it's so divorced from reality, and the reality that I live in as a consumer of legal services. I don't want to use a lawyer, right? I don't want to pay you that amount of money to do something that's going to expose, my butt to the entire world, right? And you can look at cases. There's so much reputation risk now, especially with litigation, that seeing mediation is a waste of time. A lot of people want their stuff to be secret and stay private. And so the legal community has kind of been driving litigation towards the courtroom. And consumers are now more informed than ever, and AI is increasing the accessibility to law and legal concepts. People can get up to speed on something like stare decisis, right? And they can look that up and they can figure it out for themselves. They can get a law school degree in that narrow field in fairly short order. And I can hear the groans in the room. I can hear lawyers deflating, being like, no, 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 no. We think differently. We're special and unique. And the reality is that people are going to be able to get up to speed. And what is going to be needed is the human touch. And it's not just me saying that people don't trust lawyers. Above the Law has a great article from 2014. 11 years ago, we identified this problem. And a lot of attorneys are just going, la, 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 don't want to hear it. And that's what the consumer wants. They don't want to pay you $500 to $1,000 an hour to put their business out in public so that you can look really cool and get in the newspaper when you get this multi-million-dollar judgment. That's not what the consumer wants in all cases.
What do you think are going to be the most common cases that go to ADR that the consumers are going to drive and push that way?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly things where like you're having like small disputes between, like neighbors would be a great example. I think real estate type of transactions, things where there's a tangible transaction that needs to be resolved, and you've maybe got a dispute, one way or another over some amount of dollars. I think you're going to be able to see those resolved in ADR more often. I think where you're less likely to see it is in areas where there is third-party indemnification contract, where there's an insurance contract, because I think that the insurance companies still have enough money and are entrenched in the way that they do business enough that they're not necessarily going to want to come to the mediation table. They're going to be kind of forced there at gunpoint, for lack of a better term. So anything where you're seeing consumer to consumer issues, I think that's going to be the first place where it starts. But I think once that trend begins, people are going to say, hey, this is actually way more cost effective, and this is resolving it quicker, and it's also not increasing our exposure to reputational risk. And then, if we're talking about bigger organizations, potentially regulation risk, right? Because if a story becomes big enough and enough people get outraged, we've seen that public sentiment can drive regulation, can drive legislation that would then remove that. And that's a big risk. And that's one that I think most attorneys are not addressing with their clients when they're talking to them is, hey, if this story blows up, there's a lot more at risk than just the $10 million here, right? And, as just a business case, I mean, look at Volkswagen when they got caught with their overstating their fuel economy on their vehicles. They didn't recover for that for years, and now they sell electric vehicles. So that is where I see it. Does that answer your question?
I think that's a great answer. So what would you say to lawyers who are rolling their eyes and like groaning and saying, that's not where this is going? Do you think those people are out of a job, or do you just think that their approach changes, their sales, maybe their marketing material changes? Like, how do you see those people, their role evolving?
It's not that they're going to be out of a job. It's just they need to be aware that I think that their market is shrinking, right? It's not going to be as robust. There's still going to be a role there. And what they really need to put in their head is that the courtroom is not going to be the center of gravity in law anymore. A lot of legal education is geared towards prepping for the courtroom. And that's happening less and less and less and less. And we're seeing that in workers' comp in Alaska. I mean, there was once upon a time, as recently as 2 decades ago, pretty much everything was ending up at a hearing. Now, 90% of cases are resolved via settlement or mediation. So if that's an indicator of a heavily litigated field that does involve insurers, by the way, so I mean, that's even counterintuitive to what I just said, for those of you who are paying attention. If you're seeing it there, it's not too far of a cry to start seeing it in personal injury. It's not too far of a cry to start seeing it in all these different areas, certainly in business law. I mean, business law, like I stated earlier, most contracts have an arbitration clause in it.
Yeah.
Or some type of alternative dispute resolution clause.
I think you're going to see it first at the smaller claims, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like where you think those bounds are, because if it's too small, nobody is going to go all the way through with this. But if it's too large, you're more likely to have parties that are going to want to litigate.
Yeah, I think anytime that you have private entities versus private entities, you're more likely to see it. If it's private versus government, I think you're less likely to see it, right? If there's any type of governmental involvement in it, I think that's less likely to be the case, because somebody's actually trying to change something, or there's some type of, justice element to it. I think that's less likely. When you start, I don't think you're going to see class actions go by the wayside in this type of environment. I think class actions will still continue functioning the way that they're functioning. But again, this is a speculative guess on my part, but I can already see the winds changing. But I don't know that I can give you a firm answer on what the boundaries are. But I think your intuition is correct that smaller stuff is going to be dealt with via mediation, because the cost benefit analysis is this going to be worth the hassle? And the cost benefit analysis that most people are doing, that are writing checks in these cases, is they're saying, well, is it going to cost me more to pay my attorney to deal with this, or could I just write this check, go to mediation today, write a check, be done with it, know that it's closed, and not deal with any of the stress associated with being involved in litigation? And I don't know that there's a dollar amount for it, but more of a stress and outcome boundary to it.
Yep. I think we've seen a couple of very interesting mass arbitrations where, it's something that would have traditionally been a class action, but because of the arbitration clauses in there, the attorneys end up filing.
Some of them are very weird. Like it makes sense. Some of the things that seem like class actions that become mass arbs, where it's like a minor defect or something to that effect. But we saw one, I think it was like Arby's waiters and waitresses that weren't being paid full wages because they were around tips and all that other stuff, and it was being pursued as a mass arb.
All right, I didn't.
That was the
that
first one we ever saw. In fact, I think it was close to two and a half or 3 years ago. It's when we built like all that self sign up tooling. But yeah, it is kind of shocking. I want to not completely change the subject, but somewhat change the subject. I saw, Carson, that before being a lawyer, you were a Marine Corps sergeant.
Yes.
How did that prepare or completely unprepare you for becoming a lawyer?
Yeah, it did both, right? There's nothing that fully prepares you for being an attorney. I'll grant that. It has been a total. I had to rewire my brain, because I didn't step on a law school campus till I was in my 30s, and I already had this Marine Corps experience and then a career in business development prior to that. So as far as the Marine Corps preparing me, on the one hand, it prepared me because I can relate to people better. A lot of people, when they see the military, they kind of think it as this, it's this monolithic group of people that are all pretty, homogenized and standardized. And the reality is it's not that way. There's all different walks of life. Every socioeconomic demographic you can think of in the U.S. is represented within the military, and specifically the Marine Corps. I mean, it's a wild group of people, and you wouldn't think that these people would mesh together to accomplish missions in the way that they do, but they do. So in that regard, it prepared me because it gave me an understanding of the human element. And I think that that's something that's very divorced from legal education. So I think it prepared me for the reality of practice. Now, what it didn't necessarily prepare me for is some of the nuance that you get within actual legal thinking. I tend to be a little bit more straightforward, direct and to the point. And then there's a whole world of legal thought where it's like, well, it's very gray, it's very mushy, and the Marine in me doesn't like that, right? I don't like that mushiness. I like certain outcomes. So it didn't prepare me for that, and that was the main rewiring. Is like, okay, I have to account for this squishiness where it's like, maybe I can't say exactly what I want to say and be as direct as maybe I want to be, just because either I have my client's interests or I have, I'm trying to create leverage. And to me, even at times now, it's hard to divorce that Marine Corps mindset from what I'm doing now.
I think talking about that human element reminds me kind of weirdly of a conversation we had at Smart Advocate Connect a week ago. Lawyers listening to this might hate this, but the guy we talked to was an ops guy, and he said something to the effect of law school breaks people's brains. And specifically he was talking about his lawyer, like he was his managing partner, I guess, and saying somehow law school didn't break that guy's brain. Like he still maintained like the business mindset and could talk to people and listen. So I think everything you're saying, Carson, around like the part of it that did not prepare you kind of mirrors what we've heard.
Yeah, it certainly makes me more effective as a business professional within the legal field. And that's very much how I tend to think of myself. Is I'm a business professional who has a law license. So that I do agree with that sentiment that the law school breaks people's brains. It has the tendency to divorce people from reality, and they develop this new kind of way of thinking, and they see everything through the lens of case precedent. And to me, I think that's a dangerous mindset to have, because it's relying in a kind of weird way. It's deferring all of your thinking to a judge. And the only thinking that I have now is what's here on this paper in this very narrow set of circumstances. I'm not saying that you need to ignore case law. That's not the point that I'm making here. The point is that reality and the law tends to follow society and not the other way around. Again, there are probably lawyers just screaming that disagree with me on that point, but I'd be happy to debate them on that, But
Devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate, that would be the perfect place for it. So if you only think in the world in terms of case precedent and stare decisis and all of these legal fictions that exist for the purpose of making the law system work, I think it's frankly a dangerous mindset to have, because then you can't see other possibilities. You can't think outside of that box, and then you become very inhumane towards other people, and you stop seeing these, potentially clever solutions. And that's again why I like dispute resolution as opposed to litigation. As dispute resolution, at least for mediation, you have a whole world of possibilities. We can come to our own type of agreement. We can totally shift things. Just because we've been fighting each other doesn't mean we have to keep doing that. We don't have to be competitors. We can become cooperators, and we can come to a new solution. Because in what I advise people is like, look, this person on the other side of the issue as you is just as interested in the issue as you are. They maybe have a different end state that they would prefer, but they're the only other person that maybe cares about this as much as you do. If you can then turn that into a cooperative environment and acknowledge that they've got reasonable points, you can actually make something better if you adopt that mindset. But if we go in with this litigation-based mindset that I have to win, I think that's dangerous. And I think we're kind of seeing that mindset trickle out into our society now, and how difficult that is to manage when everybody's operating that way.
I don't disagree for the most part.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's still the righteous cause,
and I think it's also like we are in the world where we're seeing people who have been killed by trucks. Like there's truck accidents, and I think it's hard to imagine the victim coming to the table with the insurance company and being like, "Let's work together to find a solution." You know what I mean? Everybody's just watching their
At the same time, I could see this being the solution for the vast majority of
soft tissue,
no, not even PI.
Oh, you're just saying in general.
I would think PI is probably one of the last places that this would touch,
because of everything Carson's saying around it being like justice based and
insurance.
You're talking about the hard money. I'm talking about the soft feeling. But
you guys are both right. On the one hand, you've got the person who wants justice.
That was very well done there.
We need Carson GPT to live in our office.
Yeah, exactly. You guys are both right. I mean, you've identified the both sides of the problem and why PI is probably going to be a late mover to the movement. Just because you've got a justice interest on one side, to your point, like if a van full of kids gets crushed by an 18-wheeler, right? Like that's horrifying. And then you've got an insurance company that doesn't want to write a check and is denied any type of culpability, or that they deny any type of payment, delay, deny, defend, the typical insurance strategy. And that just gets people irate when they're dealing with it. And so by the time you even come to the table, everybody's so mad that they can't even think straight. It's problematic. But I would offer to you that that's precisely why you might need a mediator before it becomes a bloodbath in the courtroom, because the concern and the risk associated with taking things to the courtroom is you leave it up to people that you don't know, that aren't as interested in the problem as you are, whether that be a jury or a judge. And you're banking on being able to anticipate human behavior. And to me, anticipating human behavior is one of the hardest things that you can possibly do. And I would refer back to my time in the Marine Corps as my personal evidence of seeing that play out. I mean, people are unpredictable. I mean, I've been in Afghanistan, 2009, 2010. I've seen some stuff that I was like, I never thought I would see this, right? So if anybody tells you that they know the outcome of what's going to happen in the courtroom, I would say I think that they are full. It's good to be confident but it's not good to be reckless. Right? And saying that
Yeah.
you can predict human behavior is a little reckless, in my opinion.
Carson, can you walk us through workers' comp in Alaska a little bit and how you ending up there in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out my career in the Marines. Fast forward, went to college, was living in Chicago, didn't love it. Right, kind of. I worked on a place just off of Wacker Drive, and it was kind of like that soul sucking type of corporate job that I really couldn't get behind. And so I moved up to Alaska, did insurance for a little while, and I was actually a licensed insurance producer. And I saw this claims denial process and people getting chewed up and spit out. I was like, wow, this is, not exactly, what I signed up for when I went to the Marines, to have a society that would spit people out like this, where they think that they're protected and they're not getting their protection. So I ended up at law school, came back, started practicing workers comp, because it seemed to me like I was like, okay, I can throw my energy into, taking on the underdog fight, which is the plaintiff in workers comp more often than not, because at least in workers comp in Alaska, I can't get paid for what I do by my clients directly. I cannot accept fees from them. It's against the statute. So I have to win them something that was otherwise denied. So that's how I ended up in workers comp, just from a mentality perspective. And I kept doing it just because there's so many cases. One, it's just an untapped market in the sense that there's so many cases, and there's only a handful of attorneys up here in Alaska who are willing to do it. And of those willing to do it, there's only about 3 or 4, maybe 5 that aren't retirement age. So there's a very small amount. So from a business perspective, I was like, okay, great. I don't have a massive amount of competitions. I'm not in that red ocean. I'm in my blue ocean, or as close to it as I can be. So I ended up there, and I can't get involved until something is denied or otherwise resisted in terms of a benefit, where that's paying medical benefits. And you can imagine the medical bills up here in Alaska. We have the highest cost of medical care in the US. You can imagine how big those bills get. Or their time loss benefits for time off work, or in certain situations, in the retraining, in certain cases, death benefits if they're applicable. But that's how I ended up in workers comp, and that's the workers comp system, is that basically the insurers will pay until they file a controversion notice, and that controversion notice is kind of the kickoff of the litigation process for workers comp. That's workers comp in a nutshell.
Do you see a lot of seasonality where it's the summer jobs where people are getting injured, or the opposite? Can you just walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, there's definitely seasonality to it. We have a very seasonal trades scenario up here in Alaska. So you can imagine that most of our construction is taking place during the summer. So basically, as soon as the ground thaws to the time it freezes again, it's just kind of a mad dash to get any type of construction project done. And a vast majority of the people that are coming to talk to me are in the trades, doing some type of blue collar work. And then surprisingly, the ones that are not seasonal are healthcare workers. Healthcare workers get injured at an alarming rate. I would say. I think that that's a surprising fact for most people to find out, is that healthcare workers have very, very intense jobs, and the rest of a lot of it's first responders.
How's the government shutdown affecting your practice?
The government shutdown is not really affecting my practice directly right now. I think that there's a lag effect. There is a lot of federal contracts for construction here in Alaska. We get a lot of federal dollars. So if those federal dollars aren't flowing in, the people aren't working. Therefore, there would be a lag effect to it. And I would anticipate that, if it drug on for a year, it'd really impact my business. But if it's just going to be a temporary thing, I don't know that it's going to have a massive impact.
Hope it's temporary.
Yeah.
Crazy. I think that's pretty good stopping point on our end. We covered a lot of ground. I think we covered everything from your background in the Marines to why ADR to the government shutdown. It's pretty wide scope. So we're gonna end it now. Thanks again for joining us, Carson. How can folks who are looking for you find you?
So if you're looking for me, the best way to get in touch with me right now is just shoot me an email. We're currently in the midst of a website transition, but you can just email me. If you're listening to this, they'll give it to you. It's choneycutt@alaskaworkerscomp.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And then keep an eye out for honeycuttlaw.com coming soon. And in the meantime, it's alaskaworkerscomp.com.
Amazing. We'll put those in the show notes too, so easy access. Thanks again for joining us, Carson, and we'll see you all on the next Hot Docket podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Hot Docket. We're your hosts, Bobby and Andrew, founders of MeanPug, the marketing agency for ambitious law firms.
Have questions about marketing or anything we covered today? Email us at mark@meanpug.com. Be sure to subscribe to learn more. Until next time.